The lofty preseason expectations might be unattainable now, but bragging rights are still on the line Saturday as Baylor looks to make it 2 straight over Oklahoma. Here's a quick breakdown of each team's current status, keys to victory, and final prediction for the game. Let's start with OU. The Sooners have finally put together a win streak. While it wasn't their best performance, it did show growth, at least on one side of the ball. I'll preface this with Iowa State has a great defense. That being said, Jeff Lebby, what the hell, man? His play calling has been truly befuddling. At points, I think he's an offensive mastermind. Other times, I think he is closing his eyes and throwing darts at a playbook. Speaking of throwing darts, Dylan Gabriel was not. He finished the game 15 of 26 with just under 150 yards and a score. For the second time this season, Michael Turk was the most efficient passer. We did see some drops, but it feels like it's been ages since Gabriel has connected on a deep shot to a receiver. Now, there's no question the offense should keep throwing it up there, but man, would it be nice to see one pay off. The run game felt like nothing special. Javonte Barnes was out, but the team combined for 182 on the ground. Eric Gray did what he could against a tough Iowa State run defense, racking up over 100 yards and adding a touchdown, but he hobbled off at the end of the game, which begs the question. He was already banged up, why run him up 2 scores with 30 seconds left? As a unit, the Sooners offense did what they had to do in order to secure the victory, but the combination of questionable play calling and frequent 3-and-outs didn't leave me with much confidence going into next week. The defense, however, surprisingly did. I'll preface this with Iowa State has a pretty bad offense. That being said, Oklahoma put on what was unquestionably their best defensive performance in Big 12 play this year. Despite actually outgaining the Sooners overall, Iowa State was only able to put up 66 yards on the ground, which was a huge key for the Oklahoma defense. Forcing the Cyclones to beat them through the air worked out well, as Deckers threw the ball 57 times, including 3 big interceptions. The only time Iowa State punched it into the end zone was early in the fourth quarter, and a defensive effort like that will typically win you football games. Shaun White had an excellent game, and although the Sooners only had 1 sack, they did put pressure on Deckers throughout. That being said, the performance was far from perfect. Iowa State was held to 7 of 20 on third down, which is a great thing, but there were still moments on third and long where you would hear this after the play. Oklahoma showed 5 down pressure and dropped 8, and that typically resulted in a first down. The good news is that we saw a whole lot fewer plays rushing only 3, which I think is a positive sign going into next week. Things are trending up on the defensive side of the ball, which is the best news OU fans could ask for. Past 2 games have sparked some life in the Sooners, and another win will make them bowl eligible. But it won't be easy to get revenge on the Baylor Bears. The reigning Big 12 champs came into 2022 ready to make a repeat trip to the conference title game. Unfortunately, just like the Sooners, things haven't gone according to plan. Baylor's offense has been led by a crop of new talent. The lead passer, top 2 rushers, and top 2 receivers statistically are gone, but the offense hasn't missed a beat, averaging nearly 6 points per game more than they did last year. Blake Shapen is just a sophomore but has played pretty well all things considered, completing nearly 70% of his passes for over 1,800 yards and 13 touchdowns. His recent turnover struggles, 7 in the last 4 games, mostly occur when he's out of the pocket, which may not be much of an issue considering Oklahoma's defensive line has struggled throughout Big 12 play to pressure the quarterback. Speaking of protecting the QB, the Baylor offensive line has struggled at times despite returning 3 starters, including a pair of preseason All-Americans, but they have found their rhythm as the season has progressed. At running back, the Bears are led by freshman standout Richard Reese, who has put together some impressive games, including most recently a 148-yard, 3-touchdown performance against Texas Tech. Plus, he has a sweet NIL deal. Plan on hearing his name a lot Saturday as well as over the next couple of seasons. The Bears were decimated at skill positions, but did return tight end Ben Sims, who has proven to be a receiving threat for Shapen, leading the team in receptions. Baylor's 3 leading receivers, Gavin Holmes, Monterey Baldwin, and Hall Presley, have each already eclipsed their previous highs for receiving yards in the year. The offense as a whole might not be elite, but against this Oklahoma defense, expect them to light up the scoreboard. It feels a bit weird to say about a Dave Aranda-led team, but I actually have more confidence in their offense than their defense coming into this game. It may just be the effect of how well they played last season, but there's been a bit of a drop-off on that side of the ball, solely from a statistical perspective. While the defense has allowed nearly the same total yards per game as they did last season, they have allowed 6 more points per game. The more alarming stat is that they are near the bottom of the Big 12 in sacks, which comes as a bit of a surprise considering they returned all of their starters along the defensive line from last season. For perspective, last year's Baylor defensive line finished the year tied for second in the Big 12 in sacks. Although the defensive line might not be getting to the quarterback, it has been incredibly strong against the run this year, holding opponents to under 100 yards rushing in 5 of their 8 games. All Big 12 selection, 358-pound Siaki Ika leads a group along the defensive front that will need to step up in order to slow down Oklahoma's running game. The defense as a whole is coming off a great game against Texas Tech, holding the Red Raiders to just 17 points and forcing 5 turnovers. Earlier I mentioned how Baylor's front was getting little pressure on opposing quarterbacks. Well, they also fixed that issue in Lubbock, recording 6 sacks as a unit. A repeat performance in Norman would surely see the Bears headed back to Waco with a W. This Baylor squad isn't the same team that won the Big 12 last year, but they do have the tools to beat any team in the conference week in and out. Unfortunately for them, they have been a part of an incredibly lopsided series against the Sooners, only winning 4 of the 32 matchups, and just 1 of those was in Norman. If they want to double up their road win total, here's what they will need to do. Keys to victory. One thing that made Baylor so successful last year was their ability to force turnovers while holding onto the ball, finishing 3rd in the nation in turnover mark. At the end of the year, they sat at plus 0.93 per game. They currently sit at minus 0.7. Now this was before the Tech game, but it's hard to win games when you're losing the turnover battle. A huge part of Baylor's success Saturday will be wearing down the Oklahoma defense, and there will be no better way to do that than to get the ground game going. Hand it off to Reese early and often. Baylor defensive line has struggled to produce sacks throughout most of the season. Now would be the perfect time to change that and continue the momentum that was set in Lubbock. It isn't a question of talent level. If the group executes to their potential, it will be a rough game for Dillon Gabriel. Marvin Mims is coming off one of his worst games as a Sooner, at least where there was a starting quarterback involved. It will be vital in this game to get him going again. And what better way to do so than to connect on a deep touchdown pass? If he can get on the same page as Dillon Gabriel, expect some fireworks Saturday. The 2 keys to stifling the Baylor offense focus on one position group, the defensive line. If Oklahoma can stifle the run and force Shapen to make plays outside of the pocket, folks across the nation might change their tune about this defensive unit. The last time a Sooner squad was in such a rough shape at this point in the season was 2005. And they went on to win 3 of their final 4 games, leaving the program on a high note going into the next year. Then a certain car dealership got involved, but now we just call that sort of stuff NIL. Oklahoma needs to keep the positive vibes going to win this game if they want to salvage what has been a difficult season thus far. Both Baylor and Oklahoma have turned things around with back-to-back wins, but something has to give. I think it will come down to which team has a better day running the football and controlling the momentum of the game. Baylor has one of the best up-and-coming running backs in the nation, but I think Eric Gray is special and puts on yet another stellar performance in the Palace on the Prairie. Once again, the Sooners will be unhitching the wagon and putting the ponies in the barn after a close contest, winning this matchup at home 41-35. I'm expecting Dillon Gabriel to have a bounce-back game Saturday. Check out this video here on how he got to Norman, and as always, have a great day and see y'all at the next one.